Cannibal facts that'll eat at you for days. If you thought Jeffrey Dahmer was picky for not eating people with tattoos, Venezuelan serial killer Dorangel Vargas, who ate 10 people, didn't like his victims to be overweight because he thought that they contained too much cholesterol. On Thanksgiving Day 1991, 23-year-old Omaima Nelson stabbed her sugar daddy William before carving him up and cooking his head in a deep fryer and eating him for dinner. In the 1970s, Jorge Negromonte, also known as the Brazilian Sweeney Todd, would bake his victims into pies before selling them to local townsfolk. After murdering and eating his classmate in 1981, Issei Sagawa was released from prison because of a loophole in Japanese law. 71-year-old Tamara Samsonova murdered and ate at least 11 people and kept a diary detailing her crimes. She's been dubbed the Granny Ripper, and this CCTV footage shows her carrying the head of one of her victims in a saucepan. Here are some facts that you probably didn't know that one day could save your life. Human bites are one of the most dangerous animal bites in the world due to infection rates and the amount of bacteria in our mouth. To stop a bite, brace yourself and push the part of you that's being bitten into their mouth with force so they can't rip into your skin. Palm trees are way heavier than they look, and their branches can randomly fall off without warning. If you're on a sinking ship and you're somehow able to get free, beware. If you're far down enough in the ocean, the water pressure will collapse your lungs. To avoid this, scream all the way to the top. It'll keep the pressure from killing you instantly. Okay, this may sound obvious, but do not eat uncooked slugs or snails. They have parasites that will make you paralyzed and eventually kill you. If you're trying to see if a mirror is two-sided, put your nail against the glass. If there's no gap between your nail and the reflection, run. If someone is stumbling around and sounds drunk but hasn't had any alcohol, ask them to smile. If one side of their face is drooping, get them to the hospital. They're having a stroke.
We've been getting some updates on the search for the missing Titanic submersible, but none of them have been very good. On Sunday morning, a submersible heading towards the Titanic wreckage holding 5 people lost signal with a control room. First of all, I didn't know the vessel was the size of a minivan, so everyone's crammed in there. It's also been reported that the vessel has about 40 hours of oxygen left for the 5 passengers. The hardest part of the search and rescue is that there's not many crafts out there that can go as far down as this vessel was going. The pressure at the bottom of the ocean floor is just too much, which they're also saying could be the reason this one went missing. It could have gotten crushed. Not to mention it's pitch black down there, which makes scanning the ocean floor nearly impossible. There actually are boats like one in Boston that have chains that go deep enough to reach the craft. The only problem is it would take the boat too long to get from Boston to the site. Right now they're saying that the best case scenario is that the safety mechanisms went off and the craft slowly rose to the top of the ocean. And now a ton of planes have been deployed to search an area the size of Connecticut in the ocean. And it looks just like this. It's totally flat and pretty gloomy out there. The passengers include a father-son duo, Hamish Hardin, who actually rode into space last year on one of Jeff Bezos' rockets, co-founder of the company Stockton Rush, who's actually seen here holding the actual remote of the vessel, and Paul Henry Nargolet, who's a Titanic specialist. Disneyland doesn't want you to know about the Disney Dark Ages. This is a period of time at the Disney parks known for having the worst ride malfunctions and bloodiest accidents in the park's history. It cost the park millions, it was absolutely the park's fault for it happening, and it's what tonight's episode is going to be all about. Basically, during this era, Disney said, hey, we're not going to pay to maintain the rides anymore, we're just going to fix them as accidents arise. They felt like it was costing them too much money to continually maintain the rides for safety, so they cut all of the maintenance. They even cut having people on site to make sure that people's seatbelts were fastened properly. Instead, they just had a few maintenance teams that operated at night that would fix the rides that had issues during that day. And this was a horrible idea. For instance, the teacups weren't maintained at all until an 11-year-old boy was flung from them and broke his vertebrae. And no one bothered to check Space Mountain to make sure it was functioning properly until a wheel fell off the coaster and 9 people got hurt. And as these accidents are arising, there's actually a rule in the park that attendants can't call 911. So there were all of these horrible accidents happening all the time, and no one was able to call the paramedics. Instead, they had to call Disney Services, who would in turn call the Anaheim Fire Department. There's obviously a lot more to this story, and I'm going to tell more of them here eventually, but tonight's episode is going to be a deep dive into all of this.
The police mistakenly shot me. My name is Robert Dutson, and this is my tragic story. My life took a turn on April 5th, in the Fernington area of New Mexico, where I live with my wife and 3 children. That evening, the police were called for a domestic violence incident at a house located at 5308 Valivio Avenue. 3 officers were dispatched to the scene but mistakenly knocked on our door at 5305 instead of 5308. Despite their communication with headquarters to confirm the intervention address, they continued knocking on our door and even laughed about their mistake. Concerned for my safety, I opened the door with a firearm, and one of the officers fatally shot me, firing 8 times. Upon hearing gunshots, my wife rushed downstairs and also fired her weapon before realizing they were police officers. Thankfully, no one was injured. My daughter witnessed the whole ordeal and began crying. The local police chief acknowledges the gravity of this incident and extends apologies to my family, but the damage has already been done. Like 40% of American households, we own firearms for self-defense, as was the case that night. The reason why the officers went to the wrong address, despite having the correct information, and why they continued knocking on my door is currently under investigation.
The dad from Seventh Heaven is a pedophile. This is Stephen Collins, and you might recognize him from the television show Seventh Heaven. Stephen was born in 1947 in Des Moines, Iowa, and he has had a long career in Hollywood. He was in the Star Trek movie, Charlie's Angels, and yes, Seventh Heaven. For years, Stephen was regarded as a solid actor and a stand-up guy in Hollywood. But in 2014, all of that would change. So in October of 2014, an audio tape was leaked to the media. And this voice sounded a lot like Stephen Collins' voice. And in this leaked audio tape, the man that is allegedly Stephen Collins describes in graphic detail his past abuse of minors. He even states directly in the audio tape that the girl was under the age of 14. After this tape was released, the New York City Police Department began looking into these allegations. And after that, the Los Angeles Police Department came forward and said that they had already investigated him in 2012, a few years earlier. An investigation which stemmed from a claim that was made 18 years ago about him doing the same thing. Then, a month or so later, in December of 2014, he admitted in an interview with People magazine that he had had 3 inappropriate relationships with minors in the years 1973, 1982, and 1994. So nothing really came out of all of this. There was no arrest, there was no conviction for Stephen Collins, and yet he actually went on the record in an interview with a formal publication stating that in the past he had abused 3 different minors. And to me, this shows a pattern of behavior. He abused these minors decades apart. This shows that it wasn't just a one-off mistake. This guy is a predator. And so yeah, I don't know where he's at now, what he's doing, I don't really care, but I do think that the Justice Department should have had a deeper look at these allegations. This British nurse was just convicted today of murdering 7 babies. Meet Lucy Letby. She's 33 years old, and like I said, she's from England, and just today she was convicted of murder. So before she was caught for these atrocious crimes, Lucy was employed at the Countess of Chester Hospital in England. It was there where she worked as a nurse and tended to young children and obviously babies. So babies in the maternity ward where Lucy was working just started dying randomly. And Lucy tried to explain these deaths as being completely natural, but obviously that piqued the interest of investigators. Lucy was actually arrested twice in 2018 and 2019 in connection to this investigation, and then finally in 2020. And it was when police searched her home when they discovered something disturbing. They found a plethora of notes detailing why she had done these crimes, and they were basically a written out confession. I'm going to read you a quote from one of these notes. She wrote, "I don't deserve to live. I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them." And she also wrote, "I'm a horrible, evil person, and I am evil. I did this." So while she was employed at the hospital, Lucy took the lives of 5 infant boys and 2 infant girls. And in her conviction, she was also convicted of attempting to murder a further 6 babies. Now, the cause of death of these children isn't fully understood, but they believe that she injected them with a lethal dose of air to make it look like these babies died a natural death. Now, even though the trial just ended, nobody knows exactly why Lucy targeted children. She gave no full explanation, and the only explanation that can be found is in those disturbing writings and notes that she left in her apartment. But what's shocking is that Lucy looks so normal, and she looks like someone you would trust in a hospital with your child. And this story goes to show that evil can take so many different shapes and forms. And I'm just glad that she was finally caught before more harm could be done.
There was a guy who out of boredom decided to Google his own name. To his surprise, he stumbled upon a website that had his full name as the domain. Curiosity piqued, he clicked the link and discovered a message board owned by someone with the same name, age, and interest as him. The guy found it strange that both he and the website owner lived in the same city, sharing a rare name. Strangely, the coincidences only grew stronger. The website owner had a dog with the same name as his childhood pet, posted a picture of a car identical to the one he drove in college, and even mentioned his favorite restaurant from a past job. Intrigued, he decided to leave a message on the website, only to realize it was a static page with no interactive features. So he sent an email to the owner expressing his surprise at the shared name. The following day, the website vanished without a trace. His inbox, however, held a single chilling reply. He died 8 years ago, but he never truly left. It was a simple car accident, a twist of fate on a patch of black ice. The man who hit him was rushing to the hospital. His wife was in labor. There was no blame, no anger, no vengeance in his ghostly heart. He was alone in the world, his family gone, friends lost, and at his funeral only his despised boss and the family who accidentally took his life were present. So he followed them home, drawn to the warmth of their love. He became a guardian to little Lily, rocking her crib when she couldn't sleep. And over time, Jack and Lori, the parents, sensed his presence, accepting him as part of their family. They honored him with candles and a place at their table. But now a threat looms. Lori's obsessive ex is at the door, rage in his eyes. The ghost feels a surge of power fueled by the years of offerings and love. The knife in his spectral hand is a strange sensation, a warmth against his cold existence. But he knows what he must do. Lori, Jack, and Lily are his family now. He will protect them no matter what. They won't join him in the afterlife. Not yet.
I'm going to warn everybody right now, the case that we're about to cover is easily one of the most disturbing true crime stories I've ever heard in my life, so viewer discretion is really advised for this one. This is Kevin Davis. He was 18 years old back in 2014 when this horrific event took place. Kevin lived here in Corpus Christi, Texas, and shared an apartment with his mother, Kimberly, and his sister, Destiny. On May 26, 2014, Kevin snapped. He had been having homicidal thoughts for a long time, but on that particular day, he decided to bring his dreams and his fantasies into reality. On that morning, Kevin told his mother, Kimberly, that he wanted to unalive himself, and she told him that she couldn't stop him if he wanted to. After hearing this unexpected response from his mother, Kevin went into a rage. He grabbed a cord and attempted to strangle his mother on the couch where she was sitting. But his mom, Kimberly, managed to fight him off, and in a panic, Kevin went into the other room and grabbed a hammer. Now, this is where it gets really disturbing, so if you're still here with me and you have a weak stomach, don't keep listening. Kevin then bashed his own mother's skull in with the hammer, hitting her at least 20 times, and he then grabbed a knife from the kitchen and inserted the knife into the head wound. At that point, Kimberly's head was opened up, she had a massive head wound, and her brain was exposed, and Kevin stuck his hand into his own mother's head and played with her brains. He later told detectives that it felt like putty. Now, after his mother was dead, Kevin dragged her corpse into another room and her, which is unbelievably shocking and disgusting. After all this was said and done, he went to a neighbor's house, told them to call 911, told them that he had just murdered someone, and he was arrested without incident. When Kevin ultimately arrived at the police station, he was brutally honest with investigators about his crimes. I listened to the entire interrogation, and I cannot unhear some of the things that he told investigators. It's vile and shocking. But at one point, he smiles at the investigators with a little grin and says, "Yes, I guess I lost my to a corpse." After his trial, he was handed down a sentence of life in prison. He's still alive. He's still in Texas right now. And he even admitted to investigators that if he was given the chance, if he were out on the street again, he would kill again. I'm sorry to have to fill your guys' minds with this stuff, but this is a truly disturbing case that I can't stop thinking about because of how horrific it is. And yeah, I cannot believe that this happened.
20 years ago, my life changed dramatically in a way I never could have anticipated. And it was all the result of something as simple as offering to water my best friend's flowers. My name's Kara Robinson Chamberlain, and 20 years ago, I was kidnapped from my friend's front yard by a man that was a total stranger, and I found out later, a serial killer. This is my story, one piece at a time in my own words, and I'm telling it in this way to take ownership over it and to engage with you guys, give you the story, but also show you how much more there is to it and how much more you are, even if you've had bad things happen. So there are trigger warnings in this story. You have SA, you have kidnapping. So if at any point you're feeling triggered or you're feeling anxious, then please take a moment to take care of yourself and come back when and if it feels appropriate to you. Thank you so much for being here.
What is some of the craziest stuff people have confessed to as they're dying? Well, in this series, I'm going to read to you some of the craziest ones I could find. This story comes from a hospice nurse that was dealing with a patient who had fought in the Vietnam War. Early on in his treatment, she actually asked him if he had any siblings, and he mentioned that he did have a brother, but he passed away in Vietnam. He also had a wife who had previously passed away, and because of this, he didn't have a lot of people that would come visit him. The man had dementia, and the nurse said that at times it felt like he was digging deep into his brain to find moments from his life that he could describe to the nurse in vivid detail. So one night the nurse comes in, and the man is in really rough shape, like it looks like he's not going to make it through the night. And when she walks in, he starts beckoning her over, like, come here, come here, come here. So the nurse comes over, and the man begins to tell her that his brother wasn't killed by an enemy soldier in Vietnam. He had actually killed his brother. And not only that, but these men were twins, so when the brother died, the other one fully assumed his identity when he came back to the States. Meaning that when he came back from the war, he took his brother's entire life, including his wife. The man ended up passing away that night, and later on the nurse told his daughter what she had heard. And the daughter did not believe her at all, but then years later, she finds a handwritten confession from her father stuffed in a Bible.
Do not watch this video unless you have a very strong stomach. This case and what this man did to his mum is truly sickening. On the 31st of August 2019, Margaret Sumney was unreachable. Her family just knew something was wrong. They tried and failed to get hold of her for 2 days before eventually ringing the police. The police conducted a welfare check on her in her house in Pennsylvania. What they discovered was horrifying. They found glass all over the floor and blood smeared on the walls of the home. They found the 67-year-old's body in the bathtub of the house. She'd been beaten to death. The autopsy revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to her head. Police interviewed her son David, who initially denied having anything to do with her murder. However, police searched his phone and found some horrific photographs. They uncovered 277 sickening images. These included David's selfies with his mum's dead body. In some, his face was smeared with her blood and he was doing a thumbs up pose. Police also discovered that David was in possession of some of his mum's jewellery and blank cheques. Now, he previously did have a record of assaulting his mother twice, as well as his now deceased father. The same year as his mum's murder, it was alleged that he waterboarded and strangled his ex-girlfriend in an Atlantic City hotel. He apparently slipped through the cracks in the police databases, allowing him to continue to offend. He was soon arrested, and it was found that when he committed his mum's murder, he was taking a large amount of Adderall. His defense argued that due to the substances and alcohol in his system, he had diminished responsibility. Originally, he faced charges of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. However, he entered a guilty plea, so would only be charged with third-degree murder. He was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison. Terrifyingly, as he's now been in prison since 2019, and due to his good behaviour behind bars, he may be released in just 17 years.
Story of Steven Stainer, the boy who disappeared at 8 years old and returned 7 years later. One day, while walking home from school, Steven Stainer was taken into a car. The man brought Steven home and told him that his parents had let him stay the night. That was just the beginning of the 7-year brainwashing that this child would undergo. Steven was given a new name, Dennis, and was even enrolled in schools throughout the next years of his life. According to his teenage friends, he had a pretty normal social life. Everyone thought he was just a normal teenager until one day he broke down in tears. He said he wanted to go home and he missed his family. This is the man who took Steven. His name was Kenneth Eugene Parnell. Throughout the years of Steven's kidnapping, he was sexually molested by this man. Sadly, none of his friends knew it. When Parnell would sense that Steven was getting too close to his friends, he would pick up and relocate. Later, Steven would say in his testimony that Parnell actually tried to get Steven to assist in other kidnappings. Being the good kid that he was, he never assisted. Till one day, Steven returned home from school, and Parnell says to him, "Happy Valentine's Day, meet your younger brother." Parnell had kidnapped a young boy by the name of Timothy James White. Steven knew that he couldn't let what happened to him happen to this young boy. This dude took action. Parnell would be gone regularly for work, so one day while he was gone, he picked up Timothy and fled in the night. Him and Timothy hitchhiked several miles on a desolate road in the night, till he was picked up by a car who took him to the nearest police station. At this point, Timothy James White was all over the news. So when Stephen arrived at the police station, he told police that this was indeed the missing boy. During the police investigation, police asked for his name, and he said that all he knew was that his name was Stephen. He proceeds to tell them that he was also kidnapped by Parnell several years ago. The story made national news and the media was all over it. Stephen and Timothy were safe. Parnell would soon be arrested, and Stephen returned to his family. But the story is far from over. So this guy only served 5 years before being granted parole. This was due to the statute of limitations. At this point, Stephen moved on and even met a lady with whom he would soon start a family. Just as Stephen's family was beginning to think that they could move on, things take an insane twist. It involves the made-for-TV movie, titled after his famous words, "I know my first name is Stephen." It also involves this man, seen standing behind Stephen during his media interviews. Part 2 to come.
This is the woman people are calling the real-life Gone Girl. She faked her own horrific abduction and wasted 5 years of police time. You're not going to want to miss this one. It is absolutely insane. This all begins November 2nd of 2016. Keith Papini returned home from work at around 5 p.m. He was expecting to come home to his 34-year-old wife, Sherry Papini, and his 2 kids, but they weren't home. Keith called the daycare where his kids were staying and asked when Sherry came to pick up the kids. The daycare then told him that she never came, so the kids were okay. He immediately finds this very strange, calls the police, and reports her missing. This was taken very seriously by the police. She seemed to have vanished out of thin air. It wasn't long before the news was reporting on it and her missing posters were all over California. Because there were no leads, fingers pointed at Keith, the husband. Everyone thought it was Keith. He even took a polygraph test and passed it, but people still thought it was him. That's until 22 days later, when Sherry returned. 150 miles away from where she was last seen, a driver finds her walking on the side of the road in chains. This driver called the police and she was brought in. She was covered in bruises. She had lost weight and her back had been branded. Understandably, police were shocked. When asked what happened, she claimed that 2 Hispanic women abducted her. She claimed that they were going to sell her to a man and that's why she was branded. Police were taking this very seriously. Sherry explained in detail the abuse that she went through and the room she was in. She also described the women enough for them to create a sketch of people who did not exist, because it was all a lie. Police found it very strange that these abductors just let her go, but this isn't to say that they didn't believe her. They definitely did, and they took it very seriously. They were determined to find out who did this to this poor mother of 2. The government helped pay for therapy for her PTSD and anxiety after this event. During this time, police were testing her clothes and they finally found DNA. This DNA belonged to a man, not a woman. And she apparently encountered no men during this kidnapping. They put it through the police database and nothing came up. That's until 2020 when they decided to put it through a genealogy database, hoping that someone related to the person with this DNA went on like Ancestry or anything like that. With this, they were able to find the exact person with that DNA. And this person was Sherry's ex-boyfriend. The story only gets crazier from here, so come back for part 2. It'll be up the moment I'm done filming.
Today's true crime story is pretty chilling, okay? This one even scared me, right? But anyways, this has some very disturbing and graphic details. Viewer discretion is advised. In the early 1900s in Bavaria, Germany, the group of family lived in this farmhouse called the Hinterkaifeck. The family consisted of husband and wife Andreas and Kazilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and Victoria kids Joseph and Kazilia. The family noticed a lot of strange things going on around the house. Andreas noticed a set of keys that were missing, and also there were footprints in the snow leading from the woods to the house, but there was never no footprints ever leaving the house. There was also a newspaper in the house that Andreas never remembered buying, and it looked as if someone was trying to pick at the lock on the shed. While all these strange things were going on, they had a maid at the time, and the maid was like, "Look, I gotta quit. This house is haunted." The family kept hearing noises in the attic, and the maid just like, "Look, I can't be here anymore. The noises in the attic, all the stuff going on around here, I can't do it." Although strange things continue to happen in the house, the family ends up hiring a new maid named Marie. What the Gruber family did not know was that those strange things would lead to their murder. On the evening of March 31st, 1922, the Gruber family was murdered. Victoria's son Joseph was killed in his crib, and Maria was killed in her bed. What's so crazy about this is that same day, March 31st, 1922, that was the same day that the maid Maria was hired. Meanwhile, the rest of the Gruber family was
The day after Sheila and Rachel ended Skylar's life, Rachel, the next morning, went to church camp. But what Sheila did is quite literally disgusting. The next day, Skylar's parents were freaking out. They had no idea where she was. And so her mom began to call Skylar's friends and family. And when Skylar's mom called Sheila, Sheila went over to Skylar's house, met with her mom and dad, sat on Skylar's bed, cried with her mother, wondering when Skylar was going to come home. So she ended her life the night prior, then was sitting on Skylar's bed, consoling her mom, telling her that everything was going to be okay and that Skylar would come home and that they would find her. And not only did she do that, but she literally tweeted, and I quote, "We really did go on 3." And that to me just shows how messed up of a person she is. And when Rachel came back from church camp, they continued to put up this whole facade of, "Oh my gosh, where's our best friend? What happened to her? Where is she?" for about 5 months. These girls were full on in the fall when school started, went back to school. They were walking around high school like absolutely nothing. And granted, they were suspects and they were being interrogated throughout the school year. And there were rumors going around Morgantown that they did it, but nothing was ever solidified. But in December of 2012, Rachel had an insane mental breakdown. Then a week later, she called her lawyers and she said, "I need to tell you something." And that's when she told the cops that they did it. This is a true story of how my childhood friend, Skylar Neese, was unalived by her 2 best friends. The night of July 5th, 2012, Skylar snuck out of her parents' apartment to go on a joyride with her 2 best friends, Rachel and Sheila. She snuck out around 11 o'clock or midnight, and she went down the street and met them in Sheila's car. They're from Morgantown, West Virginia, which is like a hop, skip, and a jump to Pennsylvania, so they ended up going on a joyride to PA. Ended up driving about an hour into Pennsylvania, and what Skylar thought they were doing was just smoking and going on a joyride. And that's not what happened at all. They ended up pulling over in the woods in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and they all hopped out of the car to smoke. And this is where everything goes south. We were all 3 out of the car, and then Skylar said she had to go back into the car to get something. She turns to go back to the car, and Sheila and Rachel look at each other, and they take out that Sheila had provided. And they go 1, 2, 3, and proceeded to attack Skylar. She was over 50 times. Her final word, which literally breaks my heart, was, "Why?" After that, Sheila and Rachel brought a change of clothes and a shovel in the trunk. They wanted to bury her, but the ground was too hard, so they ended up taking her and piling leaves and branches on top of her. And if that's not heartbreaking enough, what they did next was literally psychotic, insane, and just absolutely unreal.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.